It's a specific feeling, right? It's not just being tired. Everyone gets tired. This is different. You wake up, maybe you're 35, maybe 40, but your joints feel stiff, like they've seen 80 years of wear. You drop a coffee cup, and the emotional fallout feels like you've just run a marathon. You look in the mirror and think, I am doing everything right. So why does my body feel like it's fast-forwarding through the aging process?
It's the most common whisper in the chronic illness community, specifically for those with adrenal insufficiency. That sentence, I feel older than I am. And today we're going to validate that, not as a complaint, but as a biological reality.
Exactly, because you aren't imagining it. There is a physiological reason why adrenal insufficiency, or AI, mimics the sensation of accelerated aging. Today, we're doing a deep dive into an article from the My Adrenal Life community titled, How Adrenal Insufficiency Can Make the Body Feel Older Than It Is. We're going to break down the science of why this happens, what's actually going on in your cells, and most importantly, how to stop the spiral.
And the key word there is sensation. We need to be clear right off the bat. Experiencing the symptoms of aging is not the same thing as your lifespan shortening, but the experience, it is visceral and it is heavy.
So let's start at the top. The article opens with this idea that cortisol isn't just a stress hormone. It's basically the body's project manager for repair. When you have AI, you've fired the project manager.
That's a perfect way to put it. In a healthy body, cortisol has this beautiful rhythmic precision. It spikes in the morning to wake you up, but it also rises slightly to handle minor injuries, regulate blood sugar, and manage inflammation. It's constantly micro-adjusting. When you have adrenal insufficiency, you are replacing that dynamic system with a static dose of medication. You take your hydrocortisone or prednisone, and that's it. You lose the nuance.
And without that nuance, the repair work lags behind?
Precisely. Think about cellular repair. Every day your body takes minor damage, micro tears in muscles, little inflammatory sparks. Cortisol signals the cleanup crew. Without that automatic signaling, the cleanup is slower. You might go for a walk that a healthy person recovers from in an hour, but for someone with AI, that recovery might take a day. That lingering stiffness, that's the feeling of aging. It's the accumulation of unrepaired micro-stressors.
It's like driving a car where the shock absorbers are worn out. You feel every single bump in the road. And the article mentions something that I think is terrifying but validating: inflammaging.
Yes, this is a legitimate scientific concept. Chronic inflammation is strongly linked to the biological aging process. In a healthy system, cortisol acts like a wet blanket on a fire. It damps down inflammation immediately. If your cortisol coverage dips, maybe you're late on a dose or your metabolism burned through it too fast, that inflammation flares up. And what does inflammation feel like? Brain fog, joint pain, puffiness, fatigue. These are the classic symptoms of being old, but in AI, they're happening because the anti-inflammatory mechanism is manual, not automatic.
It really reframes the joint pain, doesn't it? It's not necessarily that your joints are degrading, it's that the inflammation around them isn't being managed. But I want to get into the energy aspect. The article talks about cellular exhaustion and mentions mitochondria. This feels like the root of that heavy, leaden fatigue.
This is fascinating science. So mitochondria are the power plants of your cells. Research, like what's referenced in endocrine reviews, shows that cortisol signaling is essential for optimal mitochondrial function. When cortisol is low or the rhythm is off, those power plants become inefficient. They're burning fuel but producing less energy.
So it's like trying to charge your phone with a frayed cable. It says it's charging, but it never gets past 20%.
Right. And the sensation of that is what patients describe as moving through mud. It's distinct from sleepiness. Sleepiness is, I need a nap. Cellular exhaustion is, my muscles do not have the currency to pay for this movement. That deep marrow-level fatigue is something we usually associate with the very elderly, but in AI, It can happen at 25 if your mitochondria aren't getting the right signal.
And speaking of sleepiness, let's talk about sleep, because I feel like this is the cruelest irony of AI. You are exhausted, but you can't sleep. The article says sleep disturbances amplify the aging curve. Why can't we just pass out if we're so tired?
Because sleep is hormonal. We think of sleep as an off switch, but it's actually a complex chemical ballet. In a healthy person, cortisol drops very low at night to allow melatonin to rise. In someone with AI, if your dosing is off, maybe you took your last dose too early and you're running on empty, or you took it too late and you're wired, you disrupt that architecture.
And poor sleep is arguably the fastest way to age anyone, healthy or not.
Absolutely. One night of bad sleep increases insulin resistance and inflammation markers. Now imagine 10 years of fragmented sleep. It affects collagen production, so you get the visible signs like dark circles and skin laxity, but it also affects cognitive repair. That brain fog or forgetting words, that's often just a lack of restorative deep sleep. You feel cognitively older because your brain hasn't had a chance to take out the trash, so to speak.
I want to pivot to the emotional side. The article brings up this concept of the extended recovery curve for emotional stress. I think this is where people feel the most gaslit by their own bodies. You get into a minor argument or you have a near miss in traffic and you're shaking for 3 hours. Why?
This is the loss of the buffer. A healthy stress response involves a surge of adrenaline, followed by a surge of cortisol to buffer the effects of that adrenaline and then bring you back down. In AI, you get the adrenaline, the shaking, the heart rate, but you don't have the automatic cortisol surge to modulate it, so the system stays revved up.
So you're just swimming in adrenaline.
Essentially, and recovering from an adrenaline dump without cortisol is physically expensive. It drains your electrolytes, it drains your glucose, so a 30-minute stressful event might cost a person with AI 2 days of recovery. That fragility, that inability to bounce back is something we culturally associate with aging. Oh, I can't handle the excitement anymore. But here, it's chemical.
That leads perfectly into the hydration issue. The article mentions electrolyte instability mimicking aging. I never really connected those dots. I just thought, oh, I'm thirsty.
It's huge. Adrenal insufficiency often involves aldosterone issues too, which regulates salt and water balance. If your sodium drops, you get dizzy, you get muscle cramps, you get confused. If you look at a list of symptoms for dehydration in the elderly, confusion, weakness, papery skin, it is almost identical to the symptoms of low aldosterone. You feel withered because, on a cellular level, you are struggling to hold on to volume.
Okay, we've painted a pretty stark picture here. And if you're listening, you might be nodding along, but also feeling a little heavy. But I want to get to the section of the article that I found most important. What aging in AI is not. Because despite all this, the article makes a bold claim. You are not actually aging prematurely.
This is the critical distinction. We are talking about the sensation and the symptoms of aging, not the biological reality of lifespan. Your cells aren't necessarily dying faster. Your lifespan isn't inherently shortened by this sensation. The machinery is feeling the strain of manual operation, but it's not broken.
That is such a relief to hear. It's an operational issue, not a structural failure.
Right. You are operating without the automatic transmission. You're driving stick shift in heavy traffic. It's exhausting and the ride is jerky, but the car is still capable of the journey. It just requires a different kind of maintenance.
So let's talk maintenance. The article gives some really solid strategies to support the body and reduce this aging effect. The first one is protect your energy budget. I love that term. It sounds better than pacing.
It's proactive versus reactive. Most people with AI push until they crash, and then they rest. That's the crash cycle. An energy budget means you plan the rest before you get tired. You treat your energy like a limited bank account. You don't spend every dime and then wait for an overdraft fee. You save 10% for the evening.
And that includes micro-resting, right? Just sitting down for 5 minutes before you actually need to?
Exactly. It stops the mitochondria from hitting that red line exhaustion point. Once you cross that line, recovery takes exponentially longer.
The second tip is about hydration and salt. Proactively salt. That sounds counterintuitive to everything we hear in general health news.
General health news is rarely written for the AI community. For us, salt is life.
Proactive salting means not waiting until you're dizzy. If you know you have a busy morning, or it's hot, or you're stressed, you increase sodium intake beforehand. It keeps blood volume up, which keeps oxygen getting to the brain, which reduces that old feeling of fog and weakness.
Next up is tracking inflammation patterns. This is interesting, using wearables or journaling to see what triggers the stiffness.
We have so much data available now. You might notice, hey, every time I eat this specific food or every time I sleep less than 6 hours, my joint pain flares for 2 days. When you identify the triggers, you can avoid the inflammatory spikes that make you feel 80 years old.
And then there's muscle. The article says, strengthen your muscles gently. This is tricky because exercise triggers cortisol needs. How do we balance that?
This is the delicate dance. Muscle loss accelerates the aging feeling because muscles support your joints. If you lose muscle, you ache more. But intense cardio burns through cortisol. The recommendation here is usually light resistance training. Protect the muscle mass without stressing the metabolic system. It keeps the body feeling younger and more capable without causing a crash.
The final major tip is advocating for proper replacement dosing. This feels like the holy grail, adjusting timing to match circadian rhythms.
This is the medical side. If you are taking your meds twice a day and still feeling terrible in the afternoons, you might have a coverage gap. That gap allows inflammation to creep in. Splitting doses, looking at circadian release curves, working with an endocrinologist to mimic the natural rhythm as closely as possible is the single best way to reduce that aging sensation. You're trying to turn that manual transmission into something that feels a little more automatic.
I think the emotional toll creates a feedback loop too. The article mentions the weight of vigilance. You have to be your own doctor, your own pharmacist, your own safety monitor. That wears you down.
It's what we call cognitive load. You are carrying a backpack that weighs 50 pounds, and no one else can see it. Of course you feel older. You're carrying the responsibility of keeping yourself alive every day. That requires a maturity and a resilience that ages you emotionally, even if your skin looks fine.
The article closes with a message that I think we really need to sit with. It says, this is not weakness. This is not personal failure. This is the cost of living without adrenal function.
That's the takeaway. If you feel old, it's not because you aren't trying hard enough. It's because the cost of admission for your daily life is higher. You are paying more for every step, every stressor, every conversation. The fact that you are doing it, that's not a sign of decay. That is a sign of immense adaptive strength.
I love that. You aren't failing at being young, you are succeeding at managing a complex condition. The fatigue is just the receipt for the work you're doing.
Exactly. Be gentle with yourself. You're doing a job most bodies do on autopilot, and you're doing it manually.
If this episode resonated with you, or if you know someone navigating adrenal insufficiency who needs to hear that they aren't imagining things, please pass this along. Sometimes just having the language to explain why we feel this way changes everything. Thanks for listening, and take care of your energy.